The Badgerstone. As a boy, I was filled with desert things. Beyond the green of hayfields and a land of sage and sand, I sifted artifacts of clay and bone and stone in ancient ways, filling my imaginings with adventures, digging secrets from rock shelters and caves. I recovered the cry and mighty thrill of the chase and the taste of broiling meat. I found the chill of winter and starving in the blast of summer's alkali wind. It was all mine, the Anastasia way, a new way to the making of a being. I was hearing a new voice from the dust. The tones of flaking flint and the crumbling metate, humbling seeds into small ash cakes, stirred up desire in me to survive, to master some skills of the ancient ones. I stepped far from bicycles and baseball into the making of a lone, long walking. After many years, I sat on a rock and wrote the first edition of this book. I gathered about me many walkers wanting to make a living off the land, and wanting to use Stone Age tools for making it. Awakenings happened that transformed me. They came in events of discovery, the blinding whiteness of sun-baked eyelids, the sight of perfect growing edibles, the arching curve of my sleek rabbit stick, the flickering heart of my precious prey, the darkened dust of countless cooking hearths. Generations of stone, bone, and fiber, the satisfaction and warmth of fire. The book flew through many good editions. Now this 30th year publication celebrates some early events and feelings and shares a few tales of how I learned the Anastasia way and the making of these survival skills. The Badgerstone changed my life forever. It all began when I was 12 years old. In the beginning, Miss Romaine wanted my eyes on the blackboard, but out the window and westward across the desert lay the cave, and my eyes saw only the treasure in its deep floor. On Tuesday, I started making a new pair of high-topped moccasins from an old pair of field boots. I cut off the soles, turned the boots inside out, and started sewing on soles of cowhide leather. On Wednesday, I rolled up a blanket pack, sharpened my pocket knife and a small hunting knife, and made a long possibles bag from the leg of an old pair of Levi's. I filled it with survival supplies, fish hooks and line, bandages, matches, notebook, pencils, 2 muskrat traps, a roll of waxed linen string, 3 apples, 1 large onion, 3 potatoes, 3 carrots, a poke of salt, a small canteen of water, 3 dry biscuits, and 1 Hershey bar in case of emergency. By midnight I had the soles stitched on my moccasins and a long piece of clothesline rope tied onto my blanket roll. I was ready. My mother had watched my preparations carefully and had suggested enough additional gear to fill a covered wagon. I told her I wasn't going clear to Oregon. Besides, I said confidently, you're lucky I'm even taking this stuff. If I really went whole hog Paiute, I'd have to go naked, except for my moccasins, because they're the only things I have that's real Indian. Actually, field boot moccasins were only part Indian, the part where I did the stitchings myself. Mama sort of nodded a vague understanding of my plans. She understood my need to go. Skipping school for important projects like this one wasn't against her personal plans for my success in life. Daddy wasn't too concerned about my schooling either, but he had plenty to say about me going into the desert alone. After 2 days of stern warnings on everything from mosquitoes to rattlesnakes, he ran out of advice. On Thursday morning, he drove me to the West Desert and left me there. I later learned that he followed me for the first mile just to see if I was really serious. My trail led down a steep gully for the first 2 miles. From that point, I climbed up a long side canyon to a bluff above. The desert stretched flat to the horizon. In the distance, there appeared a thin, dark line that I took to be No Name Canyon Creek. I headed for it with a sure expectation of a powerful adventure. This was my first solo expedition. I had absorbed a great deal of interesting facts about Paiutes, Anasazi, and the flora and fauna of the Great Plateau deserts of Idaho. As yet, this potful of facts had been tested only in my mind, aided by the breezes. I was counting on my instincts to bring me success. My father did not know just how far I planned to hike. Actually, I hadn't realized it myself, and I wondered right off if I could get there and back to the drop point by Saturday evening. I had previously spent parts of days alone working on Uncle Bill's farm and several one-night campouts in the desert by myself. As I hiked along the flat, 3 days seemed like quite a big chunk of time in this unknown, roadless place. But the land felt good under my new moccasin soles, and each step brought me more and more in touch with the breezes. I walked and tossed between a tiny grip of fear and a peaceful blending with the desert. Sage grew skimpy and short. Scattered on the flats were countless red ant mounds, each surrounded by circles of bare earth, where the ants had stripped the ground around their little pyramids. As I walked along, observing each ant mound, a general pattern began to emerge. The ants had constructed their rounded mounds with one side a bit steeper than the others. This steep slope was almost always facing southeast. At the base of the steep side was their entrance hole. I noted in my journal that the few exceptions were due to some natural obstruction on the south side of a mound, like a tall bush or rock that shaded it. From this observation, I concluded that the ants depended on the sun to warm their lives each day, especially in the winter where the sun swung low along the southern horizon and the ants were deep below the frost line. The steep exposure sucked up heat, which reduced the grip of winter cold on the mound. I knew that ants remained active all winter. They stored food all summer long in anticipation of the cold times. Now I have discovered they also built heat-efficient housing. I wondered what else these little tribes of desert dwellers could teach me. I thought about the story of the ant and the grasshopper, and I thought about my parents and our grocery store and the prophet who taught Mormons to store food and fuel for 2 years ahead. Somehow, I couldn't relate to the ants to Miss Romaine's class at school. I wondered whether ants found it necessary to hold classes of instruction for all upcoming antlets in order to maintain their organized and busy mound-building society. Red ants seemed ever ready for a fierce fight, though, so maybe they did have a school of some sort after all. Finally, it struck me that the ants could serve as well as teach me. No longer were those little creatures mere teachers of philosophy, social organization, and architecture. They could also be my professional guides as I hiked. It was so very simple. At any time of the year, whether cloudy or in a blizzard, the little mounds, averaged together, faced south. I knew then that I would never lose my way in the land of red ants. Red ants were also troublesome. The flat stretched on, and despite my many new thoughts and discoveries, the desert heat began to press down upon me. I had to move faster toward the still thin rim of No Name Canyon. The stitching broke slowly at first, then, stubbing against a rock, the whole right toe end tore loose and started flopping. My once pleasant walking on the new soles of my moccasins suddenly became agony as my right foot scooped up sand and stickers and, worst of all, red ants. I hobbled on, fighting back the new urge that came strong upon me with each step. Then the big toe of my left foot poked through and I tripped along and double plop in the middle of nowhere. My feet were fairly tough and the sand didn't bother me too much, but the stickers and red ants soon found the tender spots between my toes. Finally I stopped, sat on my blanket roll, and pondered my dirty feet with little red pricks and bites all over them. They looked wholly unsuited for this terrain. In just 4 miles of hiking, my Paiute stitching had failed me. Now I was totally un-Paiute and miserable. The canyon rim looked even farther away, and I wondered if I had been walking backward or something. I drank some of my water and slumped in the dirt in the big flat in the miserable west desert. Going back seemed the only way for me. The treasure was far away and the vision was fading. I drowsed in the pungent shade of a sagebrush for a few minutes, and as I lay there all my thoughts disappeared. The vision was gone. The sky was white in the heat, and alkali dirt parched my lips and tongue. The quiet settled in all around me. I could feel the thump in my heart as it performed its duty without any effort or desire on my part. Slowly, I felt thumpings coming through the ground under me. In time with my heartbeat filtered a rhythmic pounding in the soil. I felt it in the ground around me, but I could hear nothing. In the stillness, there came a sense that I wasn't alone out there after all. Was it someone walking? Indians could hear the cavalry coming every time they put their ears to the ground. I just lay there, straining. In a few minutes, I heard a muffled growl and a spitting noise. It was really close. I sat up and turned toward the sound. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. There was a small mound of sand just behind my shade bush. The bush was blocking my view, so I carefully crawled about 3 feet and peered over. Less than 5 feet away was a large hole dug into the ground. It was almost big enough for a boy my size to crawl into. Sloping upward away from the hole was a ramp of dirt tailings that peaked sharply at its top, clearly testifying to the enormous amount of earth moving that had taken place there. The muffled growls and hissing were coming from the hole. Then a furry rump emerged. It was a badger, a big one, coming out of the den backward. My curiosity faded as fear swept over me. I was too close. Every boy in southern Idaho knew that badgers didn't back down from a fight. They chased worse than cactus. I was barefoot, no chance to outrun this monster. Right then I wanted someone to appear and rescue me. I almost cried out, "Mama!" The badger was growling fiercely and hissing. I could hear my heart right between my ears. Old Badger came out of the earth and backed up the long dirt ramp. He held in his front claws a fist-sized stone, dragging and rolling it along the ramp. His flat body topped the ramp and pitched awkwardly down the other side. This brought the stone to the top of the mound, but it slipped from his grip and went rolling back down the ramp and into the hole. Old Badger seemed to realize the failure of his attempt to remove the pesky stone. He let a low growl and thrashed a bush near his nose where I lay low. Old Badger finally lumbered back into the ground, grumbling and hissing, the typical badger temperament. I had my chance to slip on my broken moccasins and get out of that place, but I didn't. Old Badger hadn't seen or smelled me on his first trip out of the hole. Maybe I could watch for a while. I could hear him deep underground, almost beneath me, spitting and struggling. Presently, Old Badger's rump emerged, and once again he backed up to the dirt ramp, pulling the stone along. Once again he backed his flat body over the crest and lost his grip on the stone. It rolled back down the hole. Old Badger spat out a whole string of unique sounds and followed the path of the stone back into the ground. The badger and the stone repeated the same dance over and over again until I became weary of watching. His situation seemed hopeless with the ready-made ramp and track for that stone to roll back on. His only hope was to keep a hold on the stone. This he seemed unable to do once his body tipped over the crest of the dirt mound. I wanted to crawl over and give him a hand. Then, on about the 14th attempt, Old Badger held onto the stone and pulled it over the crest. It tumbled down the back side away from the hole. Old Badger just sat there and rested for a while. The growling and hissing stopped. He seemed really pleased for a moment. Then I got nervous. So taken was I by the drama of the badger and the stone that I forgot how dangerous badgers were and how very, very close my nose was to his. The sudden tension I felt must have caused a movement or a vibration that reached the senses of Old Badger. He rose up and our eyes met. His nose stiffed me out, but he didn't bristle. I almost fainted. If he chased me, he would catch me, I knew it. We stared at each other for a long moment. Old Badger made the first move. Without any show of anger or bluff, he gave me a nod, a last blink, and slipped smoothly down the ramp into his new den. I could feel him digging new ground below me. Then I realized that my heart had stopped pounding, and I felt warm, at ease, and somehow very privileged. I slipped on my torn moccasins, picked up my gear, and started to leave. I glanced back at the hole and noticed the stone the badger had struggled with so long. It was cleaner and smoother than the rough native lava of the area. I stepped quickly over to the dirt mound, picked up the stone, and walked quickly away from the badger's den. To my surprise, it turned out to be a broken half of a well-crafted Indian mano, or handstone. I could smell Old Badger on it. I held it in my hand for a long time before slipping it reverently into my possibles bag. I spit right into the breeze and pointed my tattered toes westward toward the ever-thickening black line of no-name canyon. I plopped along for almost a mile before realizing that my despairing give-up-itis was completely gone. My feet still suffered from the loose stitchings in my moccasins, but not unbearably as before. What had happened? What had Old Badger done to make such a change in the way I felt in this harsh and endless desert? Had I been taught by an animal? Truly, this had happened, and a surge of genuine toughness flowed through my whole body. I was Badger Clan.